because what we were trying to do at that time is obey all the rules, you know, and everything, so that we could have access to what we needed to and everything, you know. But he would have prostitutes in his room and everything else, so we had a really hard time with him, but anyway, every trip was different and different kind of people, but it certainly did connect us. And then these other groups going over too, and the San Francisco group is still involved, and one of the things they're doing is they're having people grow things on the roofs, you know, and an environmental type thing. So there's a lot of stuff came out of that, really. And then friends, we made so many friends. I still have friends in the Soviet Union, you know.
You're still in touch with some people there?
Yeah, a couple of them, but not as much as before. But when in '95 we went on a round the world trip, and we went through there and were able to see some of them, so that was really good. So that was the last time we went. So.
What were the people like in the Soviet Union?
Well, one thing was, they always knew we were Americans, and I tried to act like, you know, and of course I was taking Russian, and I can't learn any language, you know, but that's another story. But anyway, but I knew enough at the time that I could do some things I had to do, like over the phone and stuff like that, you know. And I always tried to act like I was a Russian, you know, and all this stuff, wear the right kind of clothes and whatever, you know. And then finally they said, my friend over there said, it's no use. They can tell by just looking at your face. Those people didn't smile. And when we went into shops to buy things, you know, usually here people smile, want you to come in. You know, they're just as grim as can be. So here these Americans come in, you know, they know right away. That was kind of funny, I thought. But we made some really good friends over there, you know, and so.
Were you invited into their homes then?
Oh yeah. We stayed with some of them and that kind of thing, you know. And some of them then have since moved, and still in touch with some people who live in Toronto, Canada, who lived over there in Alberta. And the other thing about that was, we met people over there who were the Jewish refuseniks, you know, so one particular family in Alberta, they went to Israel eventually, and I'm still in touch with her now in Israel. But when we left there, they wanted us to take some jewelry and things like that with us, because they said when they left the country, they wouldn't be able to take any of that with them. So we took it with us and then got it to them when they got in Israel, you know.
Huh.
And so I'm still in touch with some there, and I've stayed with them when we went to Israel after Jim died, and David took the group from the church to Israel, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Then we went over there, and I was able to see them and stuff, so that was good. So I'm going to tell you about that, and what else? A Jewish group, and thinking of another one. Can't remember right now.
You mentioned trip to Israel. You went on one of the church trips to Israel?
I only went the one that David took over, yeah, and then we were, and that was right after Jim died, because he died in '96, you know, and we went in, I think, '97, and I took some of his ashes and we sprinkled them in the Jordan River.
Uh-huh.
That was pretty exciting. And so yeah, that was a really wonderful trip.
How many St. Francis people went on that? Do you remember?
I'm trying to remember. Irene Walden went, and we've got pictures of some of it. And of course, Art Evans was there. And what I did is I went with David and Susan, and we went down to Egypt afterward, and then came back, and then I met Art Evans and went with him and with Krishna, and we went up further north in Israel, you know, and up toward the border of Syria and stuff like that. So and we visited some of the, what are they called, the places?
Kibbutz?
Yeah, and that was interesting. So that was a pretty amazing trip, it really was. So I don't know what we have on that.
I don't know either. I hadn't thought about it for
Yeah,
a
we
long
should
time
check
since
check
you
with
just
Irene
mentioned
and
that.
see
Yeah.
what she says about that, and then
So one of the things that I notice is that the church does things sometimes in a kind of a seasonal way. It's on that side. There you go. Advent, Christmas, Lent, Easter. Do you have any particular memories of any of those seasons or particular holidays?
well, of course, like we mentioned before, the Lenten season, we usually had theater and stuff connected with it. You know, most of those that were the most impressive to me were when we had some kind of theater connected with them. You know, so I think. Otherwise, right now, I can't pick out any particular.
Any
one.
Christmas things that you remember?
Maybe I'll think of it.
How about any special events like any weddings or baptisms or anything like that?
There were always weddings and baptisms and everything. I always liked the way when we had baptisms, David would carry the baby around and we'd all get to see the baby, you know. That was really good. I like that. So,
Now, there was a big change in the early days.
what?
There was a big change with Frank leaving and then Dick George coming.
Oh, God.
Can you tell
That
us
was
some about that
bizarre,
history?
because what happened was, it did not leave at regular conference time, like usually, you know, they're gonna leave and someone else is appointed. For various reasons, Frank left like in late summer or something like that, you know, it was not during conference time. And then Dick George was appointed. And of course, he didn't know anything about St. Francis. Nobody knew anything about him. And so he showed up, and the terrible thing he did was that he decided we would no longer have wine for communion. And that's an interesting thing about wine too, because I never drank anything till I got to St. Francis. And in our early meetings, we had hard liquor. I mean, it was just, that was St. Francis, crazy people. And of course, we always had wine at communion. Well, because of his experience with alcoholics, you know, he was not going to do that. And some of the early people, the strongest people in the church, got mad and left. And a few of them have come back since then. But it was just really strange because, I mean, it was something that was so clear that should be done, you know, but they didn't like that. And then, I don't know if I should even tell this story, but the very first time he gave his commentary, you know, by that time, when Frank did his commentaries, which were really wonderful, and he got us to read lots of books and everything else from that, but he never used notes or anything, you know. So when Dick George came in, then some of the people felt that he should do it the same way. So the first time he gave a commentary, someone stole his notes. Can you believe that? I mean, how awful can people get?
Oh.
You know, I mean, and people usually have to work into that kind of thing, you know. And so anyway, people were not very nice to him. At one time he said he felt like he'd been dropped into enemy territory and he didn't know who the enemy was. But they were a wonderful family and stuff, and I'm still in touch with them. And then when he retired, and he was in a church in California at the time, because see, he came from the California conference. That's why he didn't know anything about St. Francis. That was before the two conferences went to get separated, you know. And so when he retired and he was in this church in California, Judy Robinson, that's another one from the early days. She and I went over there, and the way they did it was interesting. They had somebody from every church he served in talked, you know, in the order in which he'd done it. And I just assumed that St. Francis was the hardest church he was ever in, you know. And then I found out all the other churches were really hard. I think they figured out he survived St. Francis, so they put him in all those other ones. But I was the first one to talk, and everybody else had all these notes and everything, and I just got up and talked about what was happening. And people laughed, and I didn't think I was funny, but I said to them, which is still true, I guess, I think that St. Francis is still trying to figure out whether it's a member of the Methodist Church, So, because that was, of course, the big issue. We were going to be ourselves only, not realizing that the church had bought the land and the advantages of being part of the Methodist Church in doing things in the world, but crazy St. Francis.
So that's been a theme for years, is St. Francis part of the Methodist Church or not?
And yet what we did was reconciling. If it hadn't been for us, then things would not have happened so much in the Methodist Church with that. See, this is why the power of the whole thing is so important, And you want to know about the reconciling thing too, And that was.
How did that come about?
Well, see, that was like I said, that when I'm trying to think why we would have decided in the first place to become reconciled. Because I know we did study it for a year. Kay Bauman was very involved in that in the beginning. She'd be an interesting person to talk to too, But of course we had people who were gay in the church and stuff like that, and everything. And we were very interested in everybody being accepted, that was the thing. So then when we decided on that, we studied it for a year and then voted on it. And there was only one vote against it. And then they changed their mind later on. So that was kind of interesting. But, and then anyway, the other story, which is I've told before, but I think is so poignant, is when I was a member of annual conference and went every year, and Crazy St. Francis at the annual conference in Phoenix, we always sat at the table. They were tables to begin with, the tables right down in front. And people came who were not members of St. Francis. Well, later on, when Bishop Carcana came in, she'd established the bar. And if you weren't a member of the conference, you had to sit behind the bar, see. But at that time, we all just sat at the very front, it's Crazy St. Francis. And when we brought up this reconciling issue, because we had it every single time, we would get up and talk about it. And the bishops that we've had have just been wonderful, wonderful. Bishop Cook, I remember one of the first bishop we had, when we were talking about it, and I got up and I was talking and stuff, and then somebody from the else got up and told their story about how their daughter was lesbian and was not accepted in the church. Well, then we had a break, and that bishop came over to me and said, "I'm sorry if we cut you off. Do you think we should say some more, And I said, no. I said, that was a perfect way to end it, because the whole emotion of this thing brought it forth, And every single time then, I was going to tell you about when it first came up, and we were sitting there, and John Stetson was there. And he was not a member of annual conference. He was just with us, And so when we were discussing it, and people were just awful at the very beginning, things they were saying. And so I raised my hand because I was a member. And I asked if I could give my time to John to have him talk. And they said yes. So he told his story, and he to this day cannot remember what he said. But it was so powerful, really it was. It made such a difference. And then the next 2 years, the way they did it is that all these propositions, legislative things, we broke into different groups and discussed them. And I remember being in one of them with John Stetson about this particular issue. And you could hear the people talk, and and one woman got up and she said, she didn't know how to vote on this. She said that she could just see how important it was in the love here, when she heard John talk. But then she has this thing from the Bible or whatever, And so it was real emotional, the whole thing going through that at conference, and until finally they did go ahead and vote on it for the whole conference. that we are a reconciling conference, but there's still churches that don't know what that means. So we're trying to work with them and let them know. There's always somebody on the outside.
Are you still part of the reconciling group?
Yes and no. I am very much a part of it. But just recently, I've been working with East Kashida with the refugees. And now we have a new conference task force on refugees under Global Ministries. And so I'm on that. And so I'm not going to be on the Church and Society Reconciling Committee. But I still am very much a part of it, you know. But the refugee situation is really something in the world. You know, now we're bringing in Syrian refugees.
Mm-hmm.
And so what Barbara's trying to do is connect people from churches all over the conference who are working with refugees, you know. So we're doing pretty well with that. So.
Can you explain what Ishkashita is?
Oh, Ishkashita, that it's a word that means working together cooperatively. I think it's from a language in Northern Africa. But Ishkashita was formed by Barbara Eisworth, I can't remember how many years ago, 9, 10 or longer. And what they do is they help the refugees who are coming in. Now the refugees are not the people coming across the border from Mexico. These are the people who have permission to come into the United States, and then they eventually can become citizens. But to be a refugee, what you have to do is you have to have left your country, be in another country, and you can't go back safely, see. And then you apply to be a refugee, and there are people who are in the camps in Kenya who've been there for years and years and years, and still can't get permission to go to any country, you know. But anyway, so they come in, there's several refugee organizations, and that when they come in, they get so much help from the government for about 3 months. And during that time, they have to learn the language, learn this crazy culture, which is so different from theirs, you know, and get jobs and all of that. It's very difficult. So she works with them. And the other part of that is saving food. And so they do gleaning of all the fruit and everything within this area that people just let go to waste. And so they pick thousands of pounds of fruit every year. And the refugees are helping, and they have volunteers. And of course, they learn the language while they talk to each other, you know. And then the refugees also offer, what they offer is a lot of new ideas how to use the fruits and stuff that we don't always use. And so then they make things out of them and sell them and stuff. But it saves a lot of food, and that goes to refugees and the food bank and other food organizations. So that's one of the best ministries of St. Francis, and so I've been pretty involved in that. I'm on the board on that now.
Mm-hmm.
So.
Are there other boards that you're on now, or other committees?
That I'm on?
Uh-huh.
Well, I'm still on the Reconciling Committee, you know, and I'm on Outreach. And of course the library, which is our Library for Peace at St. Francis.
Mm-hmm.
And that's pretty important, I think. We used to have it over in that little trailer we had over there, but that was taken over by the theater group, you know. So we don't really have enough space for the library, but I'm hoping that one of these days we can expand, like we expanded where they are now is where the carport was. Maybe we can go farther out and make it bigger, you know,
Mm-hmm.
because it would be nice if we had more space, because it's a really great library. So.
I wanted to ask you something about the reconciling decision at St. Francis. How do you think that has changed the church to become a reconciling church?
How do I think what?
How do you think it has changed St. Francis to be a reconciling church?
Well, I think it's given us more publicity. I mean, in the conference and in the whole country, you know, because at one point St. Francis was given some sort of an honor about that. I can't remember what it was. We should find that out. And it's made us more aware of stigma. And this is the thing, because there's at Church and Society, one of the things they're talking about doing is doing a workshop on stigma, because there's always some group on the outside, you know. And of course now, one of the things I'm thinking of is ageism, you know, because since I'm the oldest person I know, you know, and which doesn't bother me, but it bothers me when people say, I just met so-and-so, and the first thing they say is, how old are they? And as soon as they say, you tell them, you know, they put them in a category, and that's how they treat them. I mean, and that's a form of stigma, and there's so many different things where we put these people in groups, you know, and say they're somehow less than we are. And so I think that has made us more aware of that kind of thing in a lot of different areas, you know. I mean, we were concerned about how women were left out in the beginning, but then later on you begin to see it in all sorts of different ways. And we always have to be aware that we're doing it ourselves, you know. That's the thing, you know. So I don't know if that answers your question.
Speaking of elders, is there an elders group at St. Francis?
Yes, there is an elder group, and I've gone a couple of times, but partly it has to do with time and stuff like that. But Dale Jones, I think, does that, doesn't she? Yeah, and it's pretty good. Yeah. So.
Were you involved with any of the things like family camp or couples with kids or trips to Rocky Point or any of those things?
Yeah. With family camp, and yeah, we went to family camp and were involved in that quite a bit. And I took my grandkids, which was really good, you know. So that was pretty wonderful, the family camp, and I'm just sorry we don't have it there anymore. I always thought if they got that road fixed before they came in, we'd have a better chance, you know. It was really terrible.
Yes.
Thing. So, but then Rocky Point, yeah, we took a group of St. Francis people to Rocky Point a couple of times, and that was pretty wonderful. I think I've got some pictures of those somewhere, you know. Yeah, that was pretty neat. So then you mentioned one other, what's the other? You said family camp or?
Couples with kids?
Oh, no, I wasn't involved in that, no.
Your kids were older by then?
Yeah, right.
Yeah. Yeah. What did you have anything to do with the sanctuary movement when that St. Francis was involved in that?
Well, I supported it at that time, but I wasn't really involved. But earlier on, that I worked with in that area, just in the city, you know, and stuff, you know, but not necessarily through St. Francis.
What kinds of things were you doing in the city then?
Well, I can't remember all this stuff. Well, I was just going to some of the meetings and stuff. So I'm trying to think, there was something else about St. Francis I wanted to mention. What was it? That made it distinctive.
One of the things that I know is that a couple of times in St. Francis history, St. Francis has linked up with a Jewish congregation.
Oh yeah,
Were you
that
part
was
of that?
the important thing, because when we were doing Unlearning Racism, and then out of that we connected with the Jewish community and also with the Islamic community, you know. And we actually had people on our board, on our individual committee working on that. And when we started Sunday night at the movies, it was connecting all three of these groups. And I was and we had a book study group too, with all three of these groups. And so we had some really interesting books and some interesting people like from the Islamic community come in and lead the discussion and stuff. So yeah, we always were connecting all three of these major Abrahamic faiths, you know. So that was really important. So, you know, and I think we're still trying to do that. I think Pastor Jim is really working on connecting different people and different groups, you know. I think that's one of his main thrusts, you know. That's why I appreciate him, really. Because I think that's so important. If we can get rid of thinking that we're somehow different and use each of us has our own strengths, you know. If we could use those instead saying something's wrong with the other group, you know. People are people.
You've been connected with St. Francis for over 40 years.
Yeah, well, see, it's, how long has it been? Yeah, definitely over 40 years. Because I've been here for 40 years, practically. You know, and we were all St. Francis people that started Damien, except for one.
How do you think the church has changed in the time that you've been involved with
How do
it?
I think the church
How do you
has
think the
changed?
church has changed in that time?
Well, I do think in some ways it's become more formalized. I mean, every so often I feel like shouting something at the pastor, and then I don't do it, you know. But I think there was more of a togetherness, because we were smaller, I don't know. But that's changed some, I don't know. I don't know. I think we still are. Our beliefs are still the same, you know, we're still trying to, but the other thing was, and I don't remember whether I said this at our pastor Dick George's, his memorial or not, but the thing that, I know what it was. When David came in, you know, and you probably have heard this story, but when he came in and met with Staff Parish, I think I was on Staff Parish at that time, he was told he was not to mention God or Jesus, you know. Well, of course, after a while he did and explained to us how important this was. And of course, that's the same problem that Jim's having now. I mean, too much God going on. What are they talking about, you know? I mean, you can have different ideas of God, but you know, the idea that you can't even mention them. And of course, I've been taking that course over at St. Mark's, you know, on that book about Christianity must change or die, that kind of thing. And so that certainly gives you different ideas, which is fine. But I think everybody has to do it their way and feel that they're connected to whatever this force is, you know, however they are instead of God. I don't know. St. Francis is still in its growing mood, I think. And I think it should always be, too, you know. And it will change according to the people who come in and that sort of thing, you know. So,
Where would you like to see St. Francis be going in the near future?
Well, I would like to see constant connection with the Islamic and the Jewish community and any other groups. We think we need to know more about all these different forms of religion and where people are with them and find out where. And of course, I think PCIC I think is really important, and I've always been very much a part of that. The first time I went to the PCIC meetings, what we did was we would go and visit in homes, like on the south side and stuff, and we would ask people what they needed. You know, we wouldn't tell them what they needed. We would ask them, and they would say. And that was how we eventually came up with Job Corps and things like that, you know. And then when we had the accountability sessions, I don't know if you went last Sunday. Did you go?
Not this past Sunday, no.
I couldn't go either, but the ones I've gone to were down in the community center, and they were so powerful because these people would get up and talk and tell their story, and there would be 3,000 people there. And can you imagine getting up, like somebody from the south side, you know, getting up and telling their story? I was so impressed, you know. It was really something. And that was when they had the politicians there, and they would ask them, are you going to vote for this or that? Of course, they knew ahead of time whether or not they were going to vote for it. And so if they weren't going to, the chances are they didn't come, you know. But that was really powerful, and I think PCIC has done some marvelous things. And of course, that's one thing that St. Francis has been involved in from the beginning. And I think that's one of the most important things that we do. And it's the connection with other people in the city and with their needs, you know. So it makes a difference, you know.
Have you been involved with Casa Maria at all?
Yeah, some. In the early days, I was involved with Casa Maria more, but just to support them and that kind of thing, you know.
Mm-hmm. You mentioned early on about the music as part of the services. Do you have any particular favorite songs?
Besides, May the Circle Be Unbroken.
Yes.